Hello.
Hello.
Um,
Hey, how are you?
Hi. I was good. How are you, Dr. Mayank?
How
Doing
are
well.
you? How about you, sir?
Doing very good.
So, so thanks for accepting our invitation. Thanks for being the lecture one or distinguished speaker one for a series of talk. Yeah, we are very happy and honored that you are here, and all of us are waiting for your talk. So,
Yeah, thanks a lot
before
for inviting.
starting,
Yeah.
yeah. So before starting, we thought we'll have a brief introduction, read about your profile. So Shivashakti, can you have a read?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session. It is my privilege to introduce our speaker, Dr. Goel, Associate Professor in the Software and Societal System Department and Human-Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, USA. Dr. Goel completed his BTech in Computer Science from GTS Indraprastha University, his MS from Georgia Tech, and his PhD from the University of Washington. At CMU, he leads a Smart Sensing for Humans lab, where his team develops, deploys sensors, and machine learning solution in areas such as health sensing, activity recognition, privacy-aware sensing, situational impairment, and novel user interfaces. His work goes beyond research prototypes. Many of his innovations have already been in clinical use, licensed to companies, and integrated into commercial products worldwide. Some of his impactful contributions include Goel's Eye, which improves energy expenditure estimation, digital phenotyping for multiple sclerosis, which uses passive sensor data to track behavior and mental health, and IMU2 Doppler, a privacy-preserving approach for training new sensing modalities. Dr. Goel's outstanding work has earned him several honors, including the Google Faculty Research Award and multiple Best Paper and Honorable Mention Awards at premier HCII. His research continues to make a global impact across healthcare and technology. With great pleasure, let us welcome Dr. Goel to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, and thanks to everyone for attending my talk. Give me 1 second, I'll share my screen. One second, let me turn on the other monitor as well. Can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. In Google Meets here, it does not show me the camera while I'm in the slideshow mode. So I can't see if anyone raises their hand or anything, but just unmute yourself and feel free to interrupt me, ask a question whenever you have anything. I'm fine if we go over time and I'm not able to complete all my slides. I'm perfectly fine with that. So feel free to interrupt me as you want. Okay. All right. So with that, let's start. So as already mentioned, my name is Goel. I'm a faculty here at CMU. And today I will talk about some of the research that my group has done over the last 8-9 years. And the way I like to phrase the research is calling it a billion medical devices. And these billion medical devices are sort of the consumer devices we already have with us. For example, phones, Fitbits, watches, iPads, tablets, all these devices. And because they are not medical devices, they will not work perfectly. So that's why the tagline for today's talk is using far from perfect machine learning and sensing in healthcare, because either sensing or machine learning, neither of these things are absolutely perfect right now, and they will never be perfect. But how do we still use them for high impact applications such as healthcare is what we'll focus on today. So these medical devices that people use, they do not need to remain in a clinic or hospital. And the reason for that is, if you look at this graph here that goes for around 30 or 25 years, you can see that the average life expectancy around the world has actually increased from around 57 to around 65. But in the meantime, at the same period, a number of health conditions that people have is also increasing. So basically, we are living longer, but we are living with more illnesses. As we are living with more illnesses, we often end up spending a lot of time when we are sick away from the doctor, at home. And when we are at home, there are very few devices and technology that we have right now that helps us figure out how well are we doing. And this is something that came to the forefront during the COVID pandemic. And we all sort of lived through that period. Many of us had people who were ill, were in hospitals. In many unfortunate cases, people lost their family members and loved ones as well. So overall, the pandemic stress tested the systems globally, and many people were sick at home. The hospitals were strained, and we were making a decision that should we go to the hospital or should we recover at home, because the hospitals were strained as well. It's not that if you go there you will get a bed. And of course, we all know that the situation was very bad during the Delta wave in India. Now, around this time, my mother, who lives in Delhi, in India, got sick as well. Everyone in my family got COVID at the same time. They all recovered. My mother recovered as well, but at one point she was very, very sick. And the doctor said that you have to keep an eye on her breathing rate. If her breathing rate exceeds beyond a certain number, then bring her to the hospital. Until then, don't come, because as I said, everyone was strained. The hospitals didn't have beds. So during the daytime, my dad and my brother, who lives with my parents, they were able to keep track of my mom's breathing rate, and they would just see that if she's breathing heavily or if she's breathing too much, they will keep an eye on that. At night, because all of them were sick, they all had COVID at the same time, they could not keep track of her health. But I was here in the US, so the time zone difference meant that at night for them was the daytime for me. So I could keep track of her. But how? How do I keep track of her from so far away? So let me show you a video of a system that I built. It's a very simple system. It took me less than half an hour to build, not because I knew how to, of course, because I knew how to build, but also the system I'll show you is very, very simple. So here, instead of showing you what the image of sort of like my mother sleeping, what I'm showing you is a video of the system working for me. So we use the camera that is there. And then so right now the image you see is sort of like my face, and you can see these dots and lines, or the matrix of dots and lines on the photo. So those are outputs of an algorithm called optical flow. And if you don't know the algorithm, what it basically does is it tracks the motion of that part of the image, the pixels around that dot or that line, and what direction is it going. So to make it clear, I'll play this video and you will see as I move my head from left to right or top to bottom, as I move my face, you will see those lines move with my face. Right? So as I turn left to right, you can see those lines moving up, down as well. Those lines are now moving up and down. And as I move my whole body, you can see the torso, the points around my chest moving as well. Right? So this is the basic algorithm, the implementation of this. Multiple implementations of this algorithm exist on the internet, and I borrowed one of those implementations. Then here is a video of someone sleeping. It's not data from my mom. This is actually my wife who allowed me to record this short video of her while she was sleeping. Now, the same algorithm that I showed you on the previous slide is running here. So all these dots and lines that you see on the wall is just noise because the wall is not moving. Right? So, but because it's noise, it ends up canceling itself out. And what you see at the bottom, in the middle of the sort of like in the second half of the screen where you see this white curve, that is all these lines, all these vectors that we have added together and just some basic filtering applied. And what you see, what it is capturing is the subtle motion of my wife's torso as she's sleeping and breathing. That's it. So very simple algorithm. Takes like 15 lines of code probably. And this is what I used to track my mother's breathing for 3 nights while rest of my family members were recovering from COVID. And it worked very well. Whenever something went wrong, if I used it, like here you are seeing the video in sort of daylight. I used the camera that I used was a night vision camera, so they didn't need to turn on the lights in the room, and I was able to sort of track her breathing. And if something went wrong, if she turned or the camera stopped or the connection dropped, I could call my father and just ask him that, hey, can you quickly just realign the camera or restart the app or any of those things. So this worked very well, but who's the user here? So my mom was the one sleeping, but she's not using the system. The user is really me. And in this situation, it worked because I'm rich as in because I can afford to build or use such systems. I'm motivated to do it. I'm trained to use the system. I'm trained to build this system. And I'm also invested for a short time because I only had to do it for 3 nights. If I had to do it every day, it will get tiring for me as well. And one of the ethos of human-computer interaction is that the user is not like me. The end user who is going to use the systems we build is not going to be like us. So we can't assume that they are going to be motivated, they are going to be trained to use this system, and that they will trust the system that we build as well. And in many cases, they might not be rich enough to buy that system. So we have to make sure that the systems we build are inexpensive, they are easy to use. So that's the basic vision that my group has, that we want to build these smart end-to-end health systems that explain what kind of sensing they are doing. They seek user input when something goes wrong. They provide users with actionable and useful information. And while doing all of these things, you want to keep the burden low so that the user can keep using that system day in and day after day. And as I said, we build these end-to-end systems. So we measure our health. So we measure our physiology, heart rate, breathing rate, glucose levels, sleep quality, all these things. We build systems that allow us to share this information with the doctors. We build systems that explain what we have measured to the doctors as well as to the patients. And then we ultimately help them to make a good, healthy decision about their lives. Now, I will today talk about some examples in these areas. And I'll start with a system that was also used as part of the introduction that we built called HCII, where we used a thermal camera to measure breathing of a person. So I want to connect it to the same example that I gave earlier of like tracking breathing of my mom, but now using a different sensor. So what you see here is the image captured by a thermal camera. The image on the left shows that that thermal camera is attached to the phone, which is capturing that image. And now as this user will breathe, I play this video, you will see the nostrils, their nose will change colors. And the reason that happens is because as we breathe in and breathe out, the temperature around our nose changes. In fact, when we breathe in, evaporation happens, and that leads to a lower temperature. So this is what we captured. And turns out we can, because it's a camera and computer vision algorithms have advanced quite a lot in last couple of decades, the system can work even when the person is moving a lot. So even when the person is, for example, running on a treadmill or biking, we can still capture their nostrils and extract their breathing rate from it. Doing something like that with the approach with optical flow that I showed a few slides ago will be really, really hard, because there, if we are moving, tracking those subtle motions could be really hard. But a camera allows us to do this. Now we could get breathing from it. But I'll show you one more example application that we were able to extract from this data, and that is around estimating calorie expenditure. So the most common device people use to track how many calories they have burned is a smartwatch. So we looked at how wrong a smartwatch is in calculating or estimating how much calories we have burned, and we saw that it was almost 40% wrong. That's 40%, 37.6% error in calculating how much calories we burned. And the ground truth device that we are comparing the watch against is a clinical device. It's called a calorimeter that we asked people to put on, and then they exercised, and we also had a smartwatch, and we compared the numbers of calories we got on the watch as well as on the calorimeter. In comparison, the system we built, HCII, which used this information from the thermal camera, had 5% error. So we were able to significantly reduce the error. And the main reason behind this is that the smartwatch can't measure right now how much we are breathing. So it doesn't have that breathing information. As soon as we provide the breathing information to the machine learning model, we can significantly reduce the errors. Now, this is the first application that we built sort of like using this sensing of breathing. But since then, we have actually started doing sleep apnea detection as well. So sleep apnea is one of the very common diseases that people suffer from. And we have home sleep apnea tests, but they have a very high misdiagnosis. So almost 40% tests are misdiagnosed. So what we did is we basically took our breathing detection algorithm and applied it to sleep clinics. So we are working with AIIMS Hospital in New Delhi. And there, when patients come and they sleep, we are able to track their breathing, same algorithm that I mentioned earlier. And like as it's shown in this video, we can see their nostrils, right? But even if nostrils are not visible, we can still measure this. So for example, if they are sleeping upside, like sort of like on their stomachs, we can still see the breathing pattern on the pillows and blankets because the air that we exhale is changing the temperature of the pillow and blanket, and the thermal cameras can pick that up. We take this signal, and we get sort of this information. So this nostril airflow is what we are getting from the thermal camera. And this is a period where a patient with sleep apnea stopped breathing, and then they started breathing again. So this is what we get from the thermal camera on the signal that I just showed. In addition, because it's a camera in the end, we are also able to see how the abdomen or the thoracoabdomen, basically the chest of the person, is moving. And by combining those two signals and collecting this data for a lot of people at AIIMS, right now we have data from around 100 patients there. We collect data every night at AIIMS Delhi. And we are able to build a model that is one of the most accurate models for detecting sleep apnea without these 20, 30 wires connected to the person. All we need to have is a view with a thermal camera of the patient sleeping, and that's it. So right now it is in a hospital, but we envision that system like this could be built into a handheld device that someone can basically put in their bedroom if they want to keep track of whether they have sleep apnea or how the medication is helping them. They collect that data, the doctor looks at it, and the doctor can then sort of help the patient, right? So we measure sleep apnea, we share that information with the doctor. We can explain to the doctor what we just captured, because sometimes the signal might be noisy, and then ultimately help the patient as well as the doctor in making sure that the patient is healthy. Now, I'll show you one more example of the kind of work we do, but now I'll shift gears and sort of talk about a completely different problem. So instead of physiological sensing, we look at mental health. And specifically, we'll start by talking about depression in college students, which is a big problem everywhere. It is a huge problem in the US. It is identified as a problem in the US. In India and China and all the other big countries, it is also a problem, but like the awareness around it is very low in all of these countries, because oftentimes, including the US, because students are often confused between stress and depression. There is also a gap in understanding for the students because they don't know whether it is stress or depression. They are also told that if you're in college, some stress will be there. And then there is also gap in the measurement and context for the doctor, because the doctor doesn't know that what is happening in the patient's lives, and they rely a lot on what the patients tell them. But we believe that we can add some objectivity to that decision. So we want to make sure that in the end, we build a solution that minimizes the user burden so that the user doesn't need to record information about themselves, provide context to the user as well as to the doctor, and help maintain a balance between subjective inputs, basically the information that the patient will tell the doctor, and objective estimates that the technology can help us collect and then share that with the patient as well as doctor. So we initially built the system by collecting sensor data from phones and Fitbits or fitness trackers. And we collected information such as sleep quality and sleep duration from a fitness tracker, because research has shown that people with depression often have trouble sleeping, or they might sleep too much. We also tracked step count and physical activity, because research has shown loss of energy and increased fatigue are very common in people with depression. We also tracked location, because people with depression often have purposeless physical activities and reduced social interactions. And then we collected a bunch of other data around how many phone calls people make, how many messages they send, what apps do they use, all to basically keep track of reduced social interactions. We collected this data for 138 first-year students at CMU for 16 weeks, because that's how long our semester used to be. So for one semester, we collected all of this data. The same data that I showed on the previous slide using phones and fitness trackers. At the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester, we did a subjective questionnaire. That's what psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose depression. So we did those surveys as ground truth at the beginning and at the end of the semester. And then now the sensor data that we collected for 16 weeks, we use this to estimate how well we can predict whether the student will show depression symptoms at the end of the semester. So now on this chart, every dot you see, so for example, if you look at week 1, if you look at the orange dot or the blue dot, the accuracy, that is the accuracy of our prediction that how depressed will the student report they feel at the end of the semester. So with almost more than 75% accuracy, we can identify depression symptoms with just 1 week of data. Now, as the week progresses, barring a few exceptions, especially in the first week, you can see that the performance keeps on increasing with more and more data. We are very certain that the person will feel depressed. And we reach our peak at around week 7, almost at the halfway mark of the semester. And then suddenly the performance drops. Now, we believe that the performance of the algorithm drops, and then it sort of tries to recover as well, because the students have exams at the middle of the semester, and after exams, they have a break. So those two events change students' behavior, and the model is unable to adapt to that. So some observations that we had from the study was that the model was unaware of sudden changes to the users, to the students' context, to their behaviors. We also saw that this model, while very accurate, does not generalize to similar populations in other universities. And then we also want to think that, okay, you have built a model that is 85% or 90% accurate, but how do we make this information actionable? How do doctors and patients use this? And then another solution that, some reviewers for the papers we have wrote have come up with, and it's a perfectly valid argument, that why don't we just ask the user how they feel? Why do we need to collect all of this data that could be privacy invasive, that requires them to put on a Fitbit or keep and install an app on their phone and all these things? So these are all valid questions, and I'll come back to some of these in a few minutes. But I'll start with the second point that we have here, that the model does not generalize to similar populations in other universities. In fact, if we think about general population outside the university, they're going to be even more different, because students live very similar lives. We are all students are different, but still the lives of student population is still very, very similar to each other as compared to the population outside the university. So we wanted to see how well our models would work there. So we collected some data with people outside the university, with the general population, and we focused on patients with multiple sclerosis, because patients with multiple sclerosis often have depression, fatigue, cognitive impairment, and unstable mood. So we collected similar data as we collected with the college students with this patient population as well. This time we collected data for 12 weeks, same sensors that we recorded earlier. But apart from that, we did the subjective questionnaires again at the beginning and end of the study. But we thought that we might need more surveys during the 12-week period as well. So every other week, we collected different information. And then every month, we recorded information about fatigue, sleep, and a specific survey that neurologists use for multiple sclerosis called MS burden. So we recorded all of this data apart from the Fitbit and phone data that we had recorded. And in addition to all of this, every day, 3 times every day, the patients also got a notification on their phone which asked them that how depressed do you feel on a scale of 1 to 5, and how tired do you feel on a scale of 1 to 5? Because again, remember, many readers of the papers we had written had said, can we just ask the user how they feel? So we were like, okay, we can't ask them to fill the full survey every day, but let's just ask them a couple of questions. So we collected data from 104 patients. 30% of these patients were diagnosed with depression and were taking medication as well to take care of their condition. They came from all walks of life, and this was also an older population as compared to the college students. And now some of the challenges that were there is that there is no common ground. With students, we were able to build a model because they took similar classes. They went to spring break together. They took exams together. Their final exams were together. But in a general population outside the university, we don't have any of that common ground. The timeline is varied as well. The data collection didn't start on the same day and end on the same day. And using the models we had built for college students, when we applied that those models to this population, for most measures, accuracy, precision, recall, we basically got results that were between 55 and 70%. So they were not great. So we started looking for some common ground. And this data collection also happened during the COVID time period. So there was in the US, same as in India, there was a stay-at-home period where people didn't really leave their homes. So so the data you see here on the top, the plot you see shows the number of location clusters, that how many locations people went to over time. And this line here, this period here is the stay-at-home period where people didn't leave their homes. So before that, you can see people are going through some locations, and then suddenly the number of locations they went to went down. And then as the restrictions were lifted, people sort of like recovered back. The bottom graph sort of shows the similar information, but for how much time people spent sleeping per day. And here as well, you can see that during that stay-at-home period, people were sleeping more. And then unfortunately, the amount of time we slept sort of reduced after the restrictions were released, because people had to commute, they had to go to work. All of those responsibilities meant that we were sleeping less. Now, of course, these behaviors have mental health implications as well, but I won't go into that here today. But what I want to show is, if we use this stay-at-home period as the common ground, that we just look at data, what happened before the stay-at-home period, during the stay-at-home period, and after the stay-at-home period in this general population, when we apply that, use that information to build a machine learning model to estimate depression. Now from 55 to 70%, we go up to 80%. Similar numbers are seen for fatigue, sleep quality, and MS burden as well. And here I'm just showing accuracy for the sake of simplicity, but you can refer to my papers. Please send me a message if you are unable to find them, and if you have any questions around that. Now, remember when I showed you this result, when we were talking about like how the performance was great until week 7 and then it dropped because the model didn't have any context. We realized that the context is important, and that's why with the new study, we asked people these questions multiple times a day. So we tried to see how well do these questions, how much do these questions help? So when we try to evaluate the value of these EMAs, or ecological momentary assessments, in estimating the outcomes, we see that without EMA, these performance numbers are around like 75%. With EMA, the performance improves slightly. In some cases for depression, it's significantly improved. So EMAs definitely have a value, but what we used was only one EMA per day. So we built a model that identified what is the right time to ask people questions, so that we don't ask them multiple times a day. And all they need to do in that moment is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how depressed do you feel? So around this work, we are doing several parallel studies and deployments. I today talked about the college students at CMU and the MS patients, but we are collecting data in different universities with teenage girls in local schools here at Pittsburgh, with adolescents, and as well as breast cancer survivors. And the ultimate goal for us is to build a model that is not only accurate, but also generates actionable information for the patients and doctors. And the backbone of a lot of this work is practical context and activity recognition models that my group has built. I won't go into the detail of these systems today, but this is the backbone that we are using here. But now I'll show you I'll talk about one more project where we use the same backbone of practical context and activity and behavior recognition systems for a different disease called ADHD. This is a very common disease around the world, and the diagnosis relies on, especially in children, the diagnosis for this condition relies on subjective assessments by parents and teachers. And some sparse, from time to time, the doctors also do a clinical observations. Now, as you can guess, there is a lot of misdiagnosis in this condition. And I'll show you a quote from a research paper from 2012, where the researchers found that boys who were born in December were 30% more likely to receive a diagnosis of ADHD than boys born in January. And girls born in December were 70% more likely to receive a diagnosis of ADHD than girls born in January. So suddenly, if you're born in December, it is likely that you have more likely that you have ADHD as compared to if you're born in January. You're just like 1 month apart. What happened? So we looked into it, and this research was done in Canada. And turns out what happens is, at that time in Canada, the cutoff for class for class enrollment was December. So if you are born in December, you are the youngest in the class. And if you are born in January, you are oldest in the class. So basically what ends up happening is that the children in the class, if you are the December born, you are one of the youngest in the class, means that you are probably going to be more immature on an average. So the teachers feel that you might be hyperactive. So the subjective assessments that the teachers make end up being a bit biased towards the children who are born later in the year. So this is what convinced us that we need to add some objectivity to this process. So we started looking at using smartwatch to track children's behavior. So I'll show you a couple of examples here. So here is data for our child, and this is only amount of motion over time. So, wherever the graph goes high, it means that the child is moving a lot. When it goes down, they're moving less. So this is data from child A and child B. This is a 15-minute snapshot of both the children. And here, you can see that initially they were moving a lot, and then they settled down, and then child A moved a bit more in the later half as well, but child B doesn't. Now, if we use just this information to figure out whether this child is hyperactive or not, or whether they have ADHD or not, it doesn't work very well. Because again, there is no context. The model doesn't not know what the child was doing. Maybe they were just playing right now, and that's what happened. We asked the parents to also provide us with the information that what they think the child was doing in those moments. And when we looked at that data, we saw that both of these children were playing in the first 5 minutes of this data collection. In the later half, they were both supposed to be reading. But now you can see that during the reading period, child A is still moving a lot, or like has a phase when they are moving quite a bit. And now if we look at the ground truth value of whether they have a diagnosis of ADHD or not, we see that child A has an ADHD diagnosis and the child B does not. So now what we need to do is not only track how much the child is moving, but we also want to know that what is the activity they were supposed to be doing. Are they in the playground? Are they playing with Legos? Are they playing with friends? Are they reading? Are they watching TV? So we have to do all of that. So for that, we used some of the models that we had built for identifying activities and behaviors. And from that, we basically changed the last layer of our neural network to, instead of saying what activity someone is doing, to just convert it into whether the child is supposed to be quiet right now, or is the child supposed to be active right now. And with this contextual information, when we look at our results, so you can see here we have accuracy, precision, recall, F1 score, all these numbers without context. When we only look at motion data, if you look at accuracy, we have like 67.2% accurate. When we add that context from our models that we had built, that is the child supposed to be quiet or active, the accuracy improves to 85.2, and similar patterns are seen for other sort of outcome measures as well. So this means that we now have a system that can reliably detect hyperactivity, which is one of the major symptoms of ADHD, and we can add some objectivity to the decision that the doctors make. Right now, we are looking into how do we help doctors make that decision. So how do we show the numbers we are calculating as a graph to the doctors that they can see what activity the child was doing, how much were they moving around, what locations were they in. And we are talking to doctors, we are getting inputs from pediatricians and psychiatrists to build this final system that they think will help them make the final decision. Because ultimately, we want to maintain a balance between subjective inputs that the parents and teachers provide and the accurate objective measures that we can get from technology. And it is important to go beyond context as well and amount of motion and sort of see what the child is supposed to be doing. So one of the things that we don't have results right now, but one of the things we are doing is my students have built these models where by looking at data from smartwatches, earphones, and like maybe a phone in our pocket, we can track the body pose. So for example, in this video, I'll play the video. You will see the student moving around on the left side, and the right side is the machine learning model's output of what it estimates the user's body is doing. So let me show this video. So as the user is moving around, you can see that the model has some noise, but still it can to some extent detect how the body is moving. And what we want to do is collect the same data with children when they come to the clinic, build a model that identifies how their bodies are moving, and then record that data for the rest of the study period, let's say for a month when they go back and are living at home and going to school, that how they are moving around. And can we now see if the body movement information that we get, does that help us improve the subjectivity or the objectivity of our measurements? So I don't have results for that right now, but that is something we are doing we are working on right now. But overall, what happens is that the machine learning is still not perfect. And we realize that this domain and contextual knowledge that we get from the users or some other machine learning models is actually very important. Oftentimes, we want the user to come and help us and provide us with the right information. For example, with the depression study, I showed you that asking the user a question once a day helped the model. So overall, what we see this as a real-time human sensor AI cooperation with the human and machine learning are working together for the end goal. And there are a lot of opportunities here because we can ask about specific context that the user is in, about their health, or if something changed, we can ask them what changed. For example, with that machine learning model with college students, you could have asked the college students that, okay, suddenly my model is saying that you are depressed or you are not depressed anymore. The depression symptoms have gone away. What happened? Like, is there some other change? And they could say that, I'm sleeping more right now because I'm taking a break. I just got done with my classes, or I'm in California or Florida right now because I'm on a break. And similar decisions, we still have to make sure that as we ask user these things, we keep the burden on the user low. We identify when the model might be uncertain or might be wrong, and then ask the user. And as I said earlier, that we can also identify sudden changes in behavior and get user input. As an example, one study that we just executed is again with the children with ADHD. And what we did was that the children wore a watch, right? It detected whether they were hyperactive or not. When they were hyperactive, the watch sent a notification to the parents' watch. And then the parents could tell us whether the child was really hyperactive or not. Now, what we initially wanted to do was to use this system and ask the parents if they think that the child was hyperactive or not. Whenever the child was, we thought that the child is hyperactive. So the child is moving around, jumping, shouting, doing all those things. The parents get a notification on their watch that, do you think the child is hyperactive right now? And they could say yes or no. So we built that system. But we talked to our collaborators, the psychiatrists, the child psychologists, and they absolutely hated that system because they said, if we surface these situations where the child is being difficult for the parent to control, and we ask them the question in that moment, it is going to make them even more stressed. So they asked us to do the opposite. Instead of asking when the child is hyperactive, ask the parent when the child is calm, that my sensors are telling me that the child is calm right now. Do you think they are calm? So it has multiple effects on people because suddenly they are like, oh, the child is calm right now. And that positive reinforcement to the parent themselves helps. Moreover, if let's say the parent says that the child is calm, we then show them another message. We can show them another message where it says that, oh, you should probably praise the child that they are being calm or they are, playing quietly, because it's a positive reinforcement for the child. So we built this system. I don't have a slide on results here right now, but we collected this data from 13 children and their parents for a month. And we saw that this personalized interventions helped parents and children in a better relationship with each other. Okay. Now I'll talk about one more project very quickly where we are looking at this human sensor AI cooperation with each other. And now we are working with children with skin cancer. So skin cancer patients, once they have a surgery, so, if the doctor sort of removed a lesion, for example, here on this image, you can see that the patient had lesions on their nose and the doctor sort of took those lesions out. And then after surgery, there are these wounds that the patient needs to take care of for next 2 weeks. After surgery, what patients get is a note that looks like this image on the right side, where it has all this information about like how much medication you need to take. And here you can write down what medication you took, what you didn't take. And then it also has information on how to clean the wound. So this works well enough, but oftentimes patients are confused. They also are unable to execute on all these steps and sometimes end up calling doctors or helplines a lot. Sometimes they get infections because they were not careful. So what we are doing is we are building a context-aware assistant where you have a patient and let's say they have a family member who's helping them. If this patient or caregiver has any question, they can ask the assistant that in this case could reside on the watch or could reside on this ambient speaker. And they can ask a question that did I miss something? And the agent can adaptively guide the user through the procedure. So we did this data collection with 150 skin cancer patients. We did collected data in clinic as well as at home. We introduced the patients to the study and they performed the wound care procedure where we collected data on the smartwatch. And these were sort of like the steps that they had to follow. I won't go into the detail of that, but I'll show you how accurate our machine learning model was in identifying these steps that the user is right now cleaning the counter, they are washing hands, they are washing wound, etc. Turns out the model we had used for some of the earlier projects is not very accurate. It is only 40% accurate for this wound care task. We collected some data with students here at CMU while they were making coffee. And for that task, it was even less accurate. So the activity recognition doesn't really work right now. So we tried to improve on that. I won't go into the detail of how, but we were able to improve that performance to around 50%, but that is still not good. But remember, I initially said that what we want to do is seek user input when we are confused. So we tried to implement that. And we could ask different questions. For example, tell me when you do a particular step, what are you doing right now? And are you doing a particular step? And then the model can figure out when to ask which question. Now, as you ask more and more questions, the performance will improve, but you have to maintain the burden on the user. You have to keep that burden low. So we're building systems that try to keep that burden low. And what we are trying to do is enable 3 kinds of interactions. The first is ask and guide, where the agent can ask, what are you doing right now? Observe and remind, where the agent can say, don't forget to wash your hands before touching the wound. Now, this kind of guidance can be given in advance, and you don't even need to know whether the user has washed the wound or not, or washed the hands or not. You can just give them that reminder. You want to make sure you don't give it too late or too early. So there are things you need to take care of there. And then if the user has any question, they can just ask and the agent can answer the question. So did I miss something is sort of like one kind of question. They could also ask, what should I do next? Am I doing this correctly? And the model should be able to answer such questions. I'll skip through some of these slides. And we have sort of like built this system, combined it with the large language model. And I'll show you a video of the system in action. But the video I have is not of skin cancer patients taking care of themselves because we can't record their videos and share it with people, but rather of the same system being used when people are making coffee. So here a user is using this coffee machine and let's see what happens.
Okay, what's next?
So the user asks what's next.
You can adjust the grind level with the knob on the left side of the machine.
And the agent is saying that you can adjust the grind size. And remember, there is no camera here. All of the sensing is happening with the watch.
After grinding beans, place the cup under the group head for brewing.
I do that. What's next?
After placing the cup, press the start button to begin brewing. Can you tell me what you are doing?
So that's an example of
You.
when the machine learning model was not very sure of what's happening. So it just directly asked the user that, can you tell me what you are doing? And these kind of responses really help performance. And we saw that the tracking accuracy went from almost 45% to 71.3%. And the nonsensical responses that the users got with the system were also significantly less. So if the user asked a question, they got the right response because the tracking was better. So overall, right now, as I said, we are building this system with different populations. So we are working with skin cancer patients. As I said, we collected data with students making coffee as well, but we are not doing that anymore. We are actually working with people with dementia in Europe to help them in their daily life, because oftentimes people with dementia would forget a specific thing, and we want our model to intervene as needed. For all of the work that I showed today, we are doing multiple deployments. For example, with mental health patients, I talked about some of the populations we are working with ADHD and hyperactivity. We are working with, as I said, with children with ADHD, decision support for doctors, but we are also trying to work with pharmaceutical companies to figure out how we can help them in their drug trials. And with the sleep apnea work as well, as I said, we are working with patients at AIMS Delhi, and we get data for multiple patients per night. And overall, what I want to make sure that we end with is that 1 billion medical devices is sort of like what I started with at the beginning of today's talk, but that 1 billion medical devices will have 1 billion users as well. As we build systems that they use and benefit from, we have to think of these users' needs, capabilities, and knowledge, and also their intelligence and context. So we have to make sure that we use them as stakeholders as we build these systems to benefit from the expertise that they already have. Two things that I didn't talk about today, but I'm happy to chat with you later, is that we also have to think about the agency and privacy of these users. Because if we are collecting data for them, if we are sort of observing them throughout the day, we are going to end up collecting a lot of private data, and we have to be very, very careful about that. And I'll quickly end with a shout out to all of my students. So these are 8 students that I regularly work with right now, and I tried to cover some of the work that all of them have done. And they are the ones who implement all those things. I'm just a resource for them and help them in executing their great ideas. All right, I'll end with that. I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So, Dr. Goel, it's a very good talk, and I think it's an apt time that they could listen to, because all of them are working towards Smart India Hackathon, where they have given some problem statement which is very similar to the work what you are doing.
Okay.
So mental health screening and chatbot for medical treatment and all those things. I think they got a lot of ideas from your work, so that can be used in their innovations as well. It's a very apt time that we arranged this talk, actually.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, any doubts, students? We can have a discussion with Dr. Mayank now.
Professor, I do have a query. Could you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
So regarding that sleep apnea detection, what would be the thermal camera choice? How would be the resolution and sensitivity and temperature range for sleep detection? Will we require
Sorry, complete your question. Require what?
Will we require a high-end thermal camera for detecting that, or will it be a feasibly low-cost one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, the data we are collecting is with a camera that costs 15,000 rupees, which is expensive, but much cheaper than a lot of medical devices. But what we are trying to do is build our algorithms in such a way that even if the camera is low resolution, we can still use it. So we are trying to experiment with cameras that cost less than 4,000 rupees to also see whether we can use those. And in terms of temperature range, we actually did this experiment. Some of the collaborators that we are working with on this project are from IIT Gandhinagar, and we all know how hot Gujarat gets. So we collected data there in their hostels when they didn't have fan or air conditioning on, and the system worked there as well. So in a non-air conditioned room in Gujarat, it works. Anything warmer than that, we don't know.
Can you talk some more information about the mental health screening for the college students? So it's like the students are giving the information, or it's been completely captured without their knowledge, or they have given the consent to get the data, or how will it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, so the users have consented and shared their data directly with us. It's not a university effort. So we don't get data from all the users. Whoever wants to share the data with us, and then as well, the data only goes to the researchers. It does not go to the university, because the students don't want administration to look at that data, and I completely understand that. So we try to preserve their privacy as much as possible and only work with people who are comfortable sharing.
So it's continuously monitored. Their phone calls and their chat.
Yeah,
Like
so we don't get information about who they are calling and what is the message. All we get to see is for how long did they use the call app, or for how long did they use Snapchat or Instagram. So just the high level numbers that sort of like the SDKs for Android and iOS tell us that the user spent 1 hour on Snapchat today, or the user spent or sent 15 messages across different apps. So just that level, nothing more than that. But frankly, even that information is a bit privacy invasive for many people. So we are trying to build a system that does not need that information. So for example, the most accurate sensor for that work right now for us has been step counter. In fact, just using step counter is better than asking people. Like if we ask them, right, like I said that multiple times a day, we ask them, how depressed do you feel? That question, the model that uses that information is less accurate than a model that only uses step count. So I think there is a way we can build a system like this that uses even less privacy invasive information, but that is still something that needs to be done. The other way we are thinking of doing this is the model does not share any data, right? It just runs on your phone. It just records there, and it is only for you to look at. The doctor does not necessarily need to look at. So if the actionable insights can be generated for the user on their phone, remains there, that's all we have.
So the end application will be like there will be some avatars or someone who can calm them, or what is the final outcome?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are still sort of working on that what is the right thing. So one of the things we were working on was personalized interventions, where the users get, like, as you said, like an avatar or something that tells them what to do. So we are working on that. But another thing that we are looking at right now is, instead of doing these interventions, that we think makes sense, can we see the interventions that the doctor has told the person to do? Because we don't want to replace the doctor, and remind them of those behaviors. So for example, if the doctor told me that try to go for a walk in the evening, and on the model I see that the user hasn't really gone for a walk, and we see correlation of higher depression symptoms when they don't go for a walk, can we remind them?
Okay.
And then more importantly, can we now show this information to the patient and the doctor when they meet next? That when, like, let's say I go to the doctor and it's like, oh, so how did the walk in the evenings help? And I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. At that moment, can I look at my data and see how much did I walk? Turns out maybe I only went for that walk 50% of the days. And on those 50% of the days, I slept better. It's something I don't know as well, because we are not great at pattern matching over time. But machine learning is great at that, right? So can we help the patient and doctor also understand the data we collect better?
Okay. Any other doubts?
Yeah, another thing that we are doing around those interventions is include family members a lot more. So with hyperactivity work, for example, I said, right, like we can send a notification to the parent to give a positive reinforcement to the child. But imagine same things for depression and sleep quality. So I have a smartwatch that sends me a notification that, let's say I'm washing dishes at night, that it says that, don't wash dishes right now. Your sleep is more important. You can wash the dishes in the morning, go and sleep. Now, there is a chance that I might ignore that notification. But now imagine if that same notification goes to my wife, which is that ask him to come and sleep instead of right now. That will never happen in my household. My wife would be happy with this. But imagine if it happened. Then the other person in our lives has more social capital on us than a smartwatch. So they can help us execute those interventions better. So let's say I end up eating food alone a lot, and the doctor said that try to meet people. Imagine now somehow we have to figure out how that messaging happens, but my friends get that message, that hang out with him a bit more, right? So we have to figure out how to build those systems, but we are looking at like how can we use our social network to better deliver interventions.
Maybe as a general question to help students, like most of them are looking for different mini projects, major projects and all. So can you suggest the way how they can look at a problem or how they can choose a problem which they need to work on?
Yeah, so I don't know how easy or hard it is to execute in for the students, but what I really like is talk to some experts to see what is the problem that is worth solving. Because all of us are smart people, but we also want to make sure that we are using our smartness in the right way. So I feel it could even be like the expert could be a patient as well, but like talking to people who face these issues or who help people solve these issues, that what is the problem worth solving, and then spend time in solving that.
Any other questions from students, right?
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, talked about so many projects so far, but most of them involve coding to a certain extent. So I would like to know which programming language you were most comfortable with when you were dealing with all these codings.
Yeah, so I think the most commonly used right now in my group is going to be Python. But it's not necessary, right? Like for some of the apps that we build, we have to use like Android or iPhone apps that are slightly different, like Kotlin or Java or Objective-C. So usually what happens in my group is we are not too dependent on what programming language needs to be used, because ultimately they all end up being fairly similar. And frankly, with large language models, programming has also become easier in last year or so. So now I've seen that students are able to prototype things even more quickly. I myself prefer using Python, but frankly, now I don't get that much opportunity to write code that we use in research. Students are the ones who end up implementing most of our ideas.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we'll wind up the session. Yeah, we would like to invite you to our college also during your next visit to India. So we'll meet you in person and have a lot of discussions as well.
Definitely. What does when does the semester end for you?
Now we have the odd semester running. It will end by October.
Okay.
Yeah,
like I asked because mostly I end up coming in December to India.
Okay.
But
we
it's
have
usually
we have our event semester starting in December. So next
in
semester
December.
will
Okay.
start. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, when my plans are final, I'll send you an email and we can see if I can come.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So so thank you very much, Dr. Maya, for accepting our invitation. It was very good session discussing about different inventions with real-time implications or innovations. So thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, students. Thank you, ma'am.